Hello and welcome to another episode of Kick Unhealthy Relationships to the Curb. I am your host, Stephanie McPhail. And if you notice, my co-host is not here again this evening. I apologize. He's got some awesome work that he's doing, so he will not be joining us tonight. But I think it's really going to be a great conversation. So tonight, we're actually going to be speaking with someone who is an expert in helping people heal from addiction, which I know is an issue with a lot of the clients that I work with, is that they have their addiction to the toxic relationship. However, the person they're in a relationship with tends to also have an addiction as well. So this is something that comes up a lot. And I definitely recommend coming in. And if there's any questions that you have, feel free to ask those questions because we are here to answer all of them. So let's welcome to the stage, Kevin Peterson. Welcome to the stage, Kevin.
Hey, Stephanie, it's good to see you, my friend.
Good to see you too. You got all these good things going on. I love the work that you're doing.
Yeah.
And before we start with Kevin, I just want to say too, like when I spoke with Kevin about 6 weeks ago now, I guess, he was really excited to be able to share and to be able to support our community and stuff that we are doing. But I just want to give a shout out to all the great work that he is doing to really help people. He goes above and beyond to really help people, and for a very good reason. Can you want to share us a little, maybe start us off with your story of like why you're so passionate about helping people with addiction?
Of course. You mean talk about myself? No, not that.
All of our favorite, without meaning, like we might say that we don't, but we really do.
Yeah, I know. 100%. I thank you so much for having me. It's such an honor. I'm so excited. So I grew up I always tell people I grew up in a cute little college town in California called Palo Alto that nobody ever heard of until about 25 years ago. Mm-hmm. And I lived in a really neat home. My dad was super successful, and it was this big, beautiful home, and we had BMWs and trips to Hawaii, and everything was wonderful on the outside. Mm. And on the inside, we had a big secret. And the big secret was that my mom was a prescription drug addict. And so we never knew coming home, were we going to get mom, stoned mom, or passed out mom? And I mean from like first grade forward. And so that was just our reality. And my sister and that was our reality. So I grew up in a house of addiction. And my dad was super codependent and super controlling and super overbearing. And then about 13 years old, I started experimenting with drugs and alcohol myself, and it turns out I love them. And so I just sort of jumped in full force, somehow managed to graduate from high school. And then I went to the University of Southern California in Los Angeles in 1982. And that's when things really, that's when the wheels fell off the wagon and things just got really bad. I ended up flunking out of college. And then in 1990, my dad sat me down in a 4-hour car ride and said, you know, you're my only son and I love you, but I don't believe a word out of your mouth. I think you're an alcoholic and a drug addict and a liar, cheat, and a thief. I'm pretty sure you didn't graduate from college, although you had us all come down and go through the ceremonies in 1988. And we're drawing boundaries with you. And until you're willing to get help, we're going to keep you at a distance. And that's what, we're short on time. I don't want to spend too much time on it, but that's what ended up launching me into, so I got sober on May 5th, 1991, because I started seeing a therapist with my dad every Thursday morning at 10 o'clock. And, you know, at the end of April and the beginning of May of 1991, that guy said, you know, you're an alcoholic and a drug addict and you need help. And I said, yeah, you're right. And so I got sober. And then the last piece of the equation is that in 2008, I went back to graduate school in Denver, Colorado to Regis University, and I got a master's in marriage and family therapy. So what I tell people is I grew up in a house of addiction. I became an addict. I got sober, and then I became a mental health professional. So I get it from all the different sides of the equation. Does that make sense?
Yeah, for sure. And I think that's the most authentic, you know. Yeah. When you actually understand, because I can tell when people, you know, when people are trying to coach other people about creating healthy relationships and things like that, and they're obviously not living it themselves, we can tell really quickly it's not authentic, it's not real. And so I think that says a lot, because I always know that for me with clients, I can see the holes in their story, the stories they tell themselves of like, oh, but I just needed to call them one more time. And you're like, no, this is your addiction. It's the same thing. So, and you get that as well in a different perspective. So just a curiosity, did your mother ever get sober?
No, sadly. My mom died in 2014, basically of long-term prescription drug addiction. She had 3 heart attacks, went into the hospital. It was a wild year. That was my wife and I met in 2014. My wife and I are both in recovery, and she stalked me at an AA meeting. She admits it. And we started dating in February of 2014. And let me tell you how. Then I started in April of 2014. I started my private practice, and so things were going great. And then my brother-in-law, who I grew up with, his dad died at Easter, and then my old sponsor died, which was huge for me. And then that's 2. And then at Labor Day, my wife, now girlfriend, now her wife, mother died of cancer. 10 days later, my brother-in-law's mother died, and at Thanksgiving, my mom died.
Oh gosh.
And how that went, I'll tell you about my mom. How that went was my dad called me and said, "Hey, your mom had 3 heart attacks. You need to get to the hospital." And I was like, "Oh, okay." I called my wife or girlfriend and said, "Hey, my dad called." And she's like, "Yeah, your sister called me." And I was like, "Okay." She's like, "My sister was we were living in Denver. My sister was in Orlando at Universal Studios with her kids. And by the way, when you come from a family like that, what that meant was I was on call, because that's just how it worked. One of us had to be on call at all times." Mm-hmm. And so I told my girlfriend, I was like, "Hey, I'm just going to bounce it." She's like, "Come get me." I'm like, No. She's like, "Come get me." And we went up there, and I walked into the ICU, and the surgeon came out, and he's like, I'm so sorry. She's on machines. She has a DNR. There's nothing I can do. Mm-hmm. And I was like, oh, okay, cool. And he's like, "You seem remarkably calm." I said, "Oh, my mom's a prescription drug addict. She's been that way. I love my mom. I loved my mom." Mm-hmm. But I said, "This is no surprise." He's like, "Your dad is in the waiting room bawling, saying this is such a surprise." Oh. And we're confused because the levels of her toxicity from the drugs are so high. It's not an accidental overdose. Yeah. It's just years of behavior. I'm like, "Oh, bro, let me clue you in." And I said, "I love my mom and I love her dearly. I love my dad, but welcome to my family system." So yeah. But
really interesting that your dad was so worried about you and didn't believe you, but for your mom, he was just allowing that enabling to continue.
Welcome to the world of codependency. Yeah. And I'm not making light. It was devastating. I held my mom's hand when we unplugged her. It was horrible. But my dad's mom was an alcoholic. My dad's brother and sister were alcoholics. When I look at my family tree, you shake my family tree and there's just alcoholics and addicts and mental health issues falling on both sides, by the way, and so, as one of my dad's cousins, who's my dad passed away 3 years ago, he said, "Boy, you come by this honestly. This is your family heritage." And I'm like, "Yeah, I know, I get it."
Well, but it's so interesting. Like when you look at, and this is a kind of a conversation that I have with some of my clients as well, is that, the addiction, the person who's addicted, their drug of choice is like their substance. Mm-hmm. But then for my clients, their drug of choice is the person.
And it's the same thing.
And it really, and in the years of doing this, all I notice is it really is exactly the same thing. And because of all the lies they tell themselves and how they keep going back and, like, I'm just going to go back one more time. I just need a little bit to go and I need this thing. And I'm like, you really listen to yourself, listen to what you sound like. And it really, and this is one of the things that I say, and tell me your perspective on it. But, there's the codependent, and then there's the, even like the codependent versus narcissist thing, for example. Both people might have came from unhealthy families growing up. One person becomes the one that wants to fix everything, be the hero, be the savior. I don't want to be the one that's a problem, whatever. And the other one is like, well, screw all of you. I'm going to be the mess because I don't, and it's interesting how the same family can have 2 completely different directions that the kids go in. Do you see that a lot with your clients as well?
Well, I'll do you one better. I can tell you about my younger sister, who's not an alcoholic or a drug addict.
Mm-hmm.
And she grew up in the same house as me,
Mm-hmm.
like right next door.
Yeah.
She's so lame. She went to one college and graduated in 4 years.
Oh, look at that.
And she's been married to one guy, and had like one job. I'm like, oh my God, what is wrong with you?
Yeah.
But
like normal, like the healthy. It's interesting, like the healthier version, which is so interesting.
But she has her. I mean, I don't want to get in trouble, but she has her fair share of codependence.
Yeah.
So it's we can get into a long conversation about nature, nurture, and trauma, and how it all affects, and spend a lot of time figuring that out. But that's in my books. We can cross that bridge later. But yeah, no, we definitely, what I see in family systems is the archetypes, right? I mean, here's the thing and this is kind of the big picture thing. I don't know if we talked about this before, but, when we were in the middle of COVID, what we had, and this is not a political statement, we had mom and dad fighting, okay? The two parties fighting about what to do, how to do it, why to do it. And when mom and dad are fighting, nobody's minding the kids. Mm-hmm. And the kids break into archetypes, There's the addict who's just going to party his way through it and numb out. Mm-hmm. There's the people that are going to shop their way through it. There's the fighters. You saw the fighting. You saw people fighting like crazy.
Yeah.
You saw the people that disappeared into thin air and stayed there. We saw all the classic archetypes. So we had the heroes and the fixers and the layer upon layer upon layer. That's what happens with addiction. That is exactly what happens with addiction. That's how things roll. And so it's, in my world, that tends to be super, super common. I mean, every family I meet with, every individual I meet with, a couple I meet with, they want to tell me like, oh, this is so different. And I'm like, oh, I totally get for you. This is completely out of the blue. For me, this is bread and butter. Yeah. This is peanut butter and jelly. This is all I do all day. Mm-hmm. And I'm here to help. Yeah.
Yeah, and I'm thinking, because I one of my clients was she'd never even realized that she was the hero archetype. Where she's the oldest, her younger sister's got drug addiction, food addiction, has been in the hospital, but she keeps showing up to save the day, and nobody wants to listen to her, but she's still fighting it, and and it's so, she was like, and she never saw it. Like, I called her out. I'm like, you're the hero, and who are you if you're not the hero? And I think that's that part that so many of us get caught up in, because I think in my family, I would say I was the hero too. I wonder, like, what you do with your practice, how do you help people re-navigate those roles? Because you can't be always the I mean, I had to change that about myself. I had to take a step back and be like, I'm going to let you figure this out. That was hard, but it allows people to take responsibility. How do you help people do that?
Well, I have funny you should ask. I have a book. I have two books. I have a online training system. So we do, I have an office in Denver and I have an office in Florida, and we do therapy, state regulated, but we also do coaching, which is what we're talking about. And I do this coaching all over the country, actually all over the world. And we even have like a 3-hour online education system that people can access, a sort of a self-driven type of thing that comes with the books. And so the answer to your question is, how do you do it? How do you change? There's 3 components. The first component is what we call triaging the crisis, right? So if you have an active alcoholic or an active addict that you're engaging with on a regular basis, you have to set up some real clear boundaries. And there's 3 clear boundaries. It's only 3. I see these people with like these 5-page contracts. I'm like, oh my God, no. Simple, straightforward. No drugs, no alcohol. And every boundary has to have accountability attached to it. So what we're gonna talk about is, the boundaries, no drugs, no alcohol. The accountability is there's going to be monitoring. Okay. By the way, we're going to get a third party to do that. You are not going to be the sheriff. We're going to take you out of that role. That this is part of that process for the codependent, or the hero. And then the third piece is what I call structure, which is consequences and rewards. If you can, disengage from drugs and alcohol, and the accountability function is showing us that you can, great. Then you get to be part of the family and enjoy the benefits of being part of the family. If you can't, we're not going to punish you, but we're going to have a solution for you. And that may be, it might be therapy, it might be intensive outpatient, it might be inpatient. But, my thing is, I don't believe in walking in and dropping bombs and sending people to treatment, just, kabam, I think you want to at least give them a chance to get it together. So that's the first boundary. The second boundary is either work or school, depending on how old they are, what's going on. And as you know, we're talking about adult people that don't have jobs and don't contribute to the benefit of the house, the benefit of the finances. And so that's the next one. You got to get a job. I don't care if you go work at Target. That doesn't bother me. That's honest work. That's great work. But you need to be getting up every day and getting a job. And so the accountability is, are you contributing to the finances? And then the structure, the cause. If you're not, then I'm sorry, you can't be part of the family. You can't live here. But again, we will help you. I'm not into punishing people for what's going on. I'm into offering solution. The last boundary, which is really critical in this situation, is what I call, behavior. You have to change your behavior. It's not just enough to eliminate the drugs and the alcohol. You have to change the way you treat people and the way you act. And generally that's done through help of a therapist or a coach or something. And again, we're here to help you. You can't punish people into good behavior. It just doesn't work. You have to help them. And if they choose not to take the help, then we come in with, well, okay, then you're out of the house, you're out of the family. And until you're willing to come on our side of the street, we're going to keep some boundaries with you. We love you. We love you. And we want to help you. But until you're willing to participate, we're going to keep our distance, because you're a tornado that rips through the house and rips through the family. And it destroys us every single time. And so we need to take care of us. That's the quickie version.
So I have two things with that. One of them is the hardest thing for my clients, and I bet for yours as well, is boundaries. Like,
really?
Wait a minute. I have to. So they talk about boundaries. They talk about boundaries all the time. And anyone who's listening to this right now, I bet you probably are thinking the same thing. Like, oh, I get it. But the problem is nobody ever listens to my boundaries. Okay, but what is your consequence for them? You have to follow through on the boundary. So that's the hard thing for everybody. So then a lot of my clients will come, then the person walked all over their boundary and they're just like, well, see, boundaries don't work. Teaching that is not an easy thing, because we're so used to saying, oh no, they don't work, they don't listen. And then we allow them to continue that bad behavior. Is that something you see too?
Oh yeah. And I have, as you will find, I have standard answers for all this stuff, because they're like, oh, I tried that, it didn't work. I'm like, and then what did you do?
Exactly.
They're like, what do you mean? I'm like, so you think you're just going to say some magic words and they're going to change? They have no incentive to change.
Exactly.
You have to incentivize them to change by holding them accountable with love and compassion. Mm-hmm. And remember, this is a really critical piece. The boundary isn't about them. It's about you. Yes. And now we're getting into the fun part. Now we're going to get into your self-esteem and why you have a hard time holding that boundary and holding them accountable, and then just saying, oh my God, once again, here comes the tornado. Here's one of my favorite analogies. You'll like this. I just used it last night with two families yesterday. I was like, every morning you wake up and you open the door and a car comes from a roller coaster. You have a choice. You can get on and see where the roller coaster takes you and complain about it, or you can just let it go and be like, cool. Now that's scary because you don't know where it's going to go. You don't know if it's going to come back. You don't know what's going to happen. And now we're getting into the phase 2 of, okay, once we've set the boundaries and held the addict or the alcoholic accountable, now we're going to start working on you. And why do you find this behavior acceptable? Mm-hmm. Why do you have such a hard time holding your ground? And why can't you hold the boundary and do the boundary? And that's when we really start to get into the fascinating stuff. And the thing that I'm such a huge believer in what we call family of origin trauma, and it's always the same. And God bless my clients. I love them so much. I didn't have any trauma,
Yeah, it's my favorite. My parents were great. Everything was great. I'm like, well, let's talk about that and let's see.
Perfect childhood. And I'm like, oh,
we can only know our experience though. So we're like, it was normal.
And I used to argue with people and get pissed at them. And now I'm like, okay, cool. And then I just let them talk. And within 5 minutes, they're like, well, boo. And you're like, did you hear what you just said? And they're like, oh, I said, that's okay. It's okay. But you understand that what you're doing is that you're operating out of your wound. And I get where that comes from. Now we're getting into now we're in the deep into the how do we heal the family system, you know? And that's hard.
Yeah. So I like that you use the roller coaster thing. We always say, what I say to my clients all the time is you can't be angry at the snake for biting you when you pick up the snake repeatedly. It's doing what it's going to do that. You can't be mad at it for doing its nature, but you have a different expectation. It's bitten you twice, but it's going to bite you again and you're surprised. We can't do that. But so often we're hoping, it's that definition of insanity is hoping something different out of doing the same exact thing. So, but I think part of it is knowing like, well, I know what's going to happen when I bite the snake or when I hold on to the snake, or I know there's going to be a crazy roller coaster when I get on this roller coaster ride. It becomes so routine that we go towards routine, even though routine consciously feels awful. Subconsciously, it feels like home. It feels normal.
Because 2 reasons. One, it's what we're used to. It's what we grew up with. I grew up in a house of chaos. Again, my house was beautiful. I mean, I routinely go up on Zillow and look at my childhood home. It's like a $7 million home, and I'm just like, what? And that's the world I grew up in. And on the outside, everything was beautiful. On the inside, it was chaos, trauma, crisis, insanity, I mean, it was nuts. And that's the thing, right? By the way, my other funny statement that you were talking about, the insanity or the snake is like, don't blame a clown for behaving like a clown. Ask yourself, why do you keep going to the circus?
Yeah.
And it's because that's all you know.
Mm-hmm.
So just as the addict and the alcoholic have to recover and deal with their stuff, so do you.
Mm-hmm.
And that's where the real challenging part of my job comes, because it's about slowly getting them to understand. Oh, so they said there's 2 things. 1, that's all you know. 2, that's your job. Your job is to be the fireman that runs into the fire and fix everything and put your cape on and ride the white horse and get it all good. And because that's what you've done your entire life.
Yep.
And you've gotten rewards for it. And you're probably getting massive rewards for it at work. And so you think, well, this is my function. And I'm like, yeah, unfortunately, that creates this really weird dynamic in personal relationships.
And that's what I find a lot is that a lot of, and I do work with mostly women, but they're very successful in their careers, but they did grow up being the hero of their family for whatever reason, whether it was a sick sibling or parents had issues, like whatever it was, they were the ones that figured everything out, got all the information, and then found a solution. And then when they started dating, they did the same thing, but it doesn't work that way. It's not quite as effective as in relationships.
Yeah, it creates a really weird dynamic with your partner about, what are you doing, yeah, so totally 100% same page. And by the way, let's be totally blunt. The overwhelming majority of the people that I work with are women as well. Mm-hmm. Moms, wives, whatever, that's who I work with. That's who comes to the table and asks for help.
Which is, we could have a whole show on, because I so strongly believe that men need more support and they're just not going and getting it. But that could be a whole other show, because there's a whole psychological reason for that. But and because I do work with men too, but like you said, they're not coming and whatever. But so I have a question. This time goes by so quickly when we have these conversations. Okay, I wanted to go back for a second. We did talk about boundaries, but really quickly, how do you keep people accountable when they're making these changes and these shifts for themselves?
You mean the codependent or the addict?
Either.
Okay.
Maybe. Well, either one.
So the codependent, which is the one I'm working with, the accountability comes with working with me. Is the weekly meetings with me and saying, okay, so how did this week go? What did you implement? How did it work? What did you do? Did you go to your own therapy? Did you go to a 12-step meeting? Have you read the books that I suggested? Have you watched the videos? Are you doing your homework? and it's simple yes or no. I mean, and you and I, the 5 minutes into 30 seconds into the conversation, I know whether or not they've done it. And they're like, oh no, I didn't. I'm like, okay, and that's cool. But I get paid either way, right? And that's what I tell them. I'm trying to be snotty, but you're paying me either way. And so if you want to get better, you're going to have to do your work, and same thing. So the same thing goes with the addict or the alcoholic, the boundaries have the accountability function. We're going to do drug testing and alcohol monitoring. We're going to do a weekly meeting with the family where we discover how did the drug testing go? Are you in school? Great. We're not going to do daily mom and dad, husband or wife. We are pulling you out of the addict management business. We're going to have somebody else doing that. And there's plenty of people around the country that'll do that. And it's very affordable. And we're going to put that in the hands of somebody that knows what the hell they're doing, and then, the last part on the family meeting is where we're going to talk about how did everybody get along with, it's family therapy, right? And everybody gets a voice. So the family meeting isn't, they bring the person, I hold them while they beat them. We're not doing that. This is everybody's voice is valid. Everybody gets to say something. It could be that the addict is sober and doing really well. And it's like, but their behavior hasn't changed and they're still hovering over me 24/7. And it's like, oh, okay.
There's a lot there. So first of all, I just want to so there's no magic wands to just fix everything.
That costs extra. Yeah.
I was like, I wish there was, but we actually have to do the work. You can't just pay me and then things get magically fixed, which would be great if I could do that, but we're not there yet. So really quick, we've got like a minute left. How can people find you? Because I'm sure they're going to listen to this and be like, oh my gosh, I know like 10 people, or I myself could definitely use this. How can they find you?
Website is chronichope.us. Also, YouTube channel is the Chronic Hope Institute. Oh, look at that book.
Yes.
Yeah, that's the Families and Addiction book.
Yeah.
I have another one that's for people that have like a teenager or a college kid. That's the families, the parenting the addicted child is you have someone that's like in college or high school.
I've been recommending this to some clients, so I'm hoping that they actually follow through. I'm going to keep them accountable to make sure that they're getting it as well.
And so the chronichope.us is the best way. We have a really active Instagram channel, which is under my name, Kevin W. Peterson. But the Chronic Hope Institute Facebook, or not, there's a Facebook group, but the YouTube channel is where you'll see just a ton of videos. I'm like, hopefully we'll put this here. We'll put this there,
Awesome.
Yeah.
I love it. Well, time flies when you're having a great time. We'll definitely have to have you on again. Thank you so much, Kevin, for coming and hanging out with all of us. Anyone, if this is your first time viewing, please make sure that you follow, you go and check out other of the videos and the interviews that we've done. We go live every Thursday. So again, thank you, Kevin, for coming and hanging out with us and sharing all your valuable information. And never forget, everyone, you are way stronger than you realize. See you next week. Bye, everybody.